This is Motivation. I'm Lori Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Chrissy Van. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And we're celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride.
On today's episode, we are so excited because it's all about what's going to inspire you to stop letting your maybe somedays turn into nevers. Many of us are guilty of this. And today we have a very special guest, Alexa Shaw. She's a fearless adventurer and entrepreneur who transformed her dream of reaching Everest Basecamp into reality, but not without struggle. This dream was in her mind's eye for years, but she faced some serious health struggles and had to dive into a deep journey of self-acceptance before she could push past her doubts and turn her maybe someday into a powerful experience of growth and discovery. Her story today is going to remind us that when you rev the engine and take control, your dreams are within reach. So without further ado, this is your motivation.
Let's roll. Well, this I think is our first episode back after the summer where we are doing our first interview. Is that correct, Chrissy?
That is correct. And I love that the interview guest came out of something that happened in the summer.
Yeah, the summit. Our gal, Kim, puts on the Women's Summit and in Squamish. And we met you. This is joining us today is Alexa Shaw, but you introduced yourself as Lex to me. So that's all I ever call you. But that's Alexa Shaw.
Perfect.
And we're so excited because we met you at the summit and you were coming down from Utah in the United States.
Yes.
And you joined us, and instantly our hearts melded together within about 10 minutes. Am I correct in that thought
absolutely.
Or feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I have a tidbit about that as well. So,
tell us more.
Oh, yeah, tell us. Yeah, let's kick it off. What's your tidbit? I'm curious.
Okay, the long short version. I actually broke my wrist maybe a week before the Women's Moto Summit. And we had kind of corresponded this trip with my brother's birthday, and he wanted to go ride bikes in Whistler. And so all stars aligned. It was going to work out. We were going to go ride bikes. And so we actually came up to Squamish area, Whistler area, about a week early to ride bikes. And I had broken my wrist, right, like a few days before this trip. And I was devastated. I was so
no doubt
sad because I love to mountain bike, and after pregnancy and postpartum and trying to recover from that, I was feeling very disconnected from my bike and really wanted to get back on that. And so the goal of Whistler actually helped motivate me to achieve that as well. And so to be a week out and then I broke my wrist and I just was like, do I want to go anymore? Like, is there even any reason? And I kind of pulled up my bootstraps and was like, no, you committed to this. There's a reason you need to go. There's a reason you need to be there. The universe put this together for you. You need to show up. So I'm in Whistler for the whole week. I carpe diem. I had a great week with myself. No problem. I actually kind of still am like, maybe we should all take ourselves on vacations every summer.
Yes.
But yeah, I hiked, I went and rode horses. Like, I had a wonderful time. And that Friday when I was getting ready to leave for the summit, I turned to my husband and I was again kind of feeling like that little bit of social anxiety that you feel before you walk into a space where you literally know no one. I knew Kim and that was it. And was just going to walk into this. And I've learned with motorcycles and the motorcycle community, but that is actually one of the most powerful places to be, because it puts you in a space where you're vulnerable and you're open and you talk to people that you maybe wouldn't have done so otherwise. And I've learned that that's actually one of my favorite places to be, even if it makes you a little anxious before you get there.
I feel that in my bone.
Right? So I turned to my husband and I'm like a little nervous. And he's like, oh, you're going to be fine. And I'm like, okay, you're right. There's someone there that I'm supposed to meet. It's fine. So I literally go, show up, take my sweet time finding a parking spot, which was the wrong parking spot anyways, and sat in my car for a while. And then I was like, okay, here we go. I walk out, I go find Kim, I say hello, and I say, Kim, please introduce me to your friends. I don't know anyone. That would be a great starting point for me. So she instantly takes me over to you two, right? Introduces me. We start talking. I had really great conversations with both of you. I think, Chrissy, you got pulled away. But Laurie and I turned to each other. And I think the second that Kim said both of your names, it was out the window, So I'm talking to Laurie. We're in this conversation, and all of a sudden it goes to the deepest, darkest desires of
On brand.
like, what is the meaning of life, and why are
on
we
brand.
here? and anyways, it was the most beautiful, deep felt, fast connection, maybe like that I've ever experienced. And I remember after our conversation, Laurie, I went and I texted my husband and I was like, been here 10 minutes, already found her. It's fine.
Yes.
Oh, that
Yeah.
Oh, it's epic.
Yeah. And then just that encounter really set me up for success for the rest of the weekend. So thank you. Also, y'all are beautiful.
I love that.
And in that deep conversation, because that's how I remember us cracking jokes too, and your humor and everything. And I was just like, oh, we're each other's people, like it's that when you're just, you get those, like, there's a different just kind of energy that comes in, that you're just like, oh, our paths are supposed to cross, I've been fortunate where it's like, now I know that feeling where you're like, hold on to that person. And I think I left you a face or a video right after the summit. And I was like, hey, let's make sure we're friends. I was like, let's not lose each other. Yeah. And part of that conversation is really what we're going to talk about today. And I'm so excited to hear about, because within that quick little 10 minutes that the conversation was more than 10 minutes. It happened in a matter of 10 minutes where we dove deep. And you shared this beautiful story about that you were it was actually a partial story because you were headed to the other chapter of that. And essentially, and I'm going to just give the kind of like beginning of it. And then I want you to tell it in your own words, is that you shared that you went on this health journey, and part of the goal was this other to go to base camp at Everest once you completed this health journey to a certain extent of it. And that this is something you'd always wanted to do. And that's kind of where you set it yourself up with that reward. You tell in your own, because I could be getting this, mixed up in the joys of our conversation. But, and then since then you have done just that. You have gone to base camp to Everest and only gotten back like 10 days. So we really want to hear from you of like where that kind of began, that journey to get there, but then also when being there, that kind of future version of yourself now in the present.
Yeah.
What was that all for you? Where are you on it all now?
Yeah.
Big question.
I'm curious to start off on like, where was the seed planted?
Yeah, that's great.
What was ahead of you there? So where did the Everest seed start?
Yes. Okay. So, okay. Where to start? Just kidding. I know exactly where to start. So when I was a kid, my dad was extremely adventurous, and he was really into whitewater kayaking. And he and my grandpa took a trip to Nepal. I think I was roughly the age of 10, 8 or 9, 10. And they went to Nepal and they did this whitewater rafting experience. And I remember him telling me about it and not really fully grasping the gravity of like, where is he going? What is he doing? I mean, you look at it through a child's eyes. But for some reason I knew it was important. I knew like there was this like bead of importance. I mean, this is back in like 96, so not a lot of people are headed to Nepal at that point for tourism. And so when he comes back, he brings this like trundle of things with him, right? Like these treasures. My little kid just came to life in these small little trinkets, like these little necklaces that are about Buddha and that whole meaning of life and the symbols, and these little jewelry pendants that look like they're 300 years old, but they probably aren't. But as a kid, you're like, wow.
Yes.
And he also brought back like a lot of knockoff Oakley glasses and like North Face
As one
coats,
should.
Yeah. And my siblings were like, wow, this is cool. Because do you remember how great Oakley glasses were?
Oh,
back
yeah.
in the
Yeah.
90s?
The white
I'm like-
ones?
Yes.
100%. That's how you can tell Lori and I are from small towns, because I was
Yeah.
like, yes, the white ones.
The white ones.
Yeah. Same. But yeah, I really gravitated to more of that kind of Indiana Jones looking, feel, artifact type trinkets that he brought back for me. And I was so enchanted and enamored with these things, and like the pictures, he finally got his roll of film developed, and I was able to go through and look at all the temples and the gold and the monkeys and the people. And I just, at that point in time, told myself, like, firmly resolved, you are going to Nepal. Like, you will get there. And see, look, I'm already getting emotional.
Yeah.
This is good. We couldn't ask for better.
I'm sure I'll do it again and again. But it's always kind of been there. So fast forward a little bit. I don't think my parents fully intended for the product of the woman that I became. In a way, I think that they wanted me to be independent and they wanted me to be strong, but I don't think they were expecting me to be quite as stubborn and motivated and determined as I really am. And so that showed up for me a lot. And when I met my husband, his name's Carver, he was also obsessed with Nepal.
Stop.
Yeah, and we kind of bonded over this. He would tell me stories about how, when he was 10, 11, 12, he was reading all of the books that were coming out about the climbers summiting Mount Everest, like Into Thin Air. And
That's a
these
fantastic
stories.
book, not to pause you, but if you have
Isn't
not
it?
read
Yeah.
Into Thin Air, it is such a gripping read, and also true story, weather nerd
Yeah.
in me, all the things. So anyways, continue.
Yeah. So he was that kid that asked his parents for Christmas to buy the banquet ticket to go watch the Into Thin Air author present his story. And so that was him. He was like, I'm going to go climb Everest one day. Like, I'm going to go to Nepal. And so boy meets girl. And we bond over this, desire and love of Nepal is one of the many things that I love about him. But it was interesting because when he and I met, I had done a little bit of traveling, but not anything as to what I was about to embark on with him. And when we were getting married and talking about our honeymoon, he's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I want to go to Thailand. And he's like, what? Like, people go to Hawaii. We don't go to Thailand. And so I literally, you guys, made a full PowerPoint presentation and sat him down
I'll tell you.
and put
There's
him
the
in front
stubborn
of it.
determination.
Yes. Put him in front of the screen and was like, slide 1. Look at this. I'd like to do this. Do you see the elephants? Do you see these beaches? And once I had, sold him, it really tumbleweeded from there, essentially, where we decided to take 2 months and we just wandered through Asia for 2 months for our honeymoon.
Incredible.
And
Wow.
this was before cell phones were part of your journey. So literally we carried around a Lonely Planet book, and it was our Bible. And that was how we got around. So like in China and things, there's no English. We're in like the countryside of China. We're in a little place called Guilin. And I remember we go up to this bus station, open the book. We're like, oh yeah, this is the town we want to go to, which was another town outside of, it's called Yangshuo. And we take the book and we hold it up to the glass, ticket stand. And we just like point to the words and like put up 2 fingers. We're like, yeah, like 2 tickets, please.
Wow.
And that was an epic adventure that really set both of us up with a true passion and love for traveling. And I tell people to this day that it only takes one good trip.
Yeah.
It only takes one.
You ain't kidding. Yeah.
No. And once you've done that, and once you've tasted it and you've had this experience of getting out of like what your world is, it's addictive and it's powerful. And I always tell people too that traveling is the best investment I ever made in myself. And it teaches me more, it's taught me more than I can even comprehend. And I'm just a big proponent. We've now been to 72 countries together.
Incredible.
72?
Something like that. I don't know. I'll be honest with you.
Wild. That's amazing.
And also doing it full throttle
7.
travel, like, right? Like, you obviously just hearing your travel style. It's not like we're going to go to our compound and let the doors close. Like, you actually
security will keep it there.
Like, like experiencing, making mistakes, bumping along. Like, I'm sure there's a million, like, because that's the thing when you travel like that, no matter, even if you're a planner, shit's going to hit the fan in the journey. And like, those often end up the best fucking stories of the journey.
They're the best.
But
for
some people, the thought of that is so insanely not palatable because the fear gets in the way. And you kind of have to like tamper that down to be like, it's worth it though, because you end up meeting different people or having interactions with strangers or witnessing something you didn't think you'd ever witness. And your whole perception of the world, like, trust me, I'm back in my hometown. Like, I guarantee you that there are people in this little town that I live with that haven't seen beyond the borders of their like municipality in X number of years. And people do live in that box.
Yeah.
You're like, fuck the box.
Yeah, fuck that box.
Lex is like, I'm in Utah. There's a lot of people living in the box in Utah, you know? So like, it's not even like you're in this live somewhere, grew up somewhere where you were surrounded by people that were living desperately, or not desperately, but in a really big way outside the box. Am I correct in that assumption of like in Utah, it's a very like standardized version of living?
Yeah. And it's also really interesting because people have an expectation of what traveling should cost. And I can tell you there are $2 a night hostels out there. You might sleep in them. You might have a terrible time, but you can make it work.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
have the full experience still, right? Like, it's like, look, at the end of the day, everybody can to some extent or not, or I shouldn't say everybody, but I think a lot of people use it as their excuse because so-and-so travels in a certain way. The comparison of like, well, I can't do that, so I'm not going to go at all, robs you of this enriching opportunity that you can make it work.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a slight tangent. I'm sorry. I apologize.
We love tangents on podcasts.
We do it often.
The more I've been getting into health and talking to women of every single age, one of my best friend's mothers just passed away 2 days ago, actually.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, me too. She was a wonderful, wonderful human, but she lost her battle to ovarian cancer. This was her second instance, and she was only 58 years old.
So young.
And it's been, an emotional week for me, but also kind of one of understanding like life is finite, at least this one. And we all deserve to have experiences and to not rob yourself of that based on a someday narrative, which is actually exactly what I was doing with Nepal, which we can get back into.
Yeah, that's a great segue into it.
But I think what you said is so important too, is like, and to like just highlight it, is really and truly is like that idea. We get ideas and we get dreams and goals and all those things. And we can do the one day, someday, it's not the right time now because, and all of the reasons. But the reality of it is that we don't know how what time we actually have. And you could find every excuse in the book that feels very, very valid. And you will find someone that agrees with you on that very valid reason. But there is so many more important reasons to go and figure it out and go do the thing, which it sounds like is what you've kind of exactly just done, right? But I think it is important to say just that, what you just mentioned.
Well, and even like I can interject, like for myself, that became a huge pillar of why I live my life and take risks when I do. I lost my dad quite young. I was 17, but I remembered in his office, and you'll appreciate, I'm like, I'm going to say a poem because this is what we do. And I know Lori's heard it on here before, but I like live by it. And it's the clock of life is wound but once, and no man has the power to tell just when that hand will stop at late or early hour. This is the only time you own. Live, love, toil with a will. Place no faith into tomorrow, for the clock may then be still. And it's like, that's been the essence of my navigation, because I do think there's enough distraction. And dare I say, it's like a little bit like audacious of us to think that we'll just have endless time. We don't know. And we know enough people in our lives, whether it's happened directly or in our wheelhouse, that you learn that the difficult way, the fragility. And it's like, no matter what it looks like for you, those may be some days, if you have to put them into reality, which sounds like you got to a point where you were realizing there was a bit of someday syndrome. So what did that look like for you?
Absolutely. Let's get into it. I could kind of talk about what we're just talking about for a very long time. I have like a whole theory on it, but I want people to realize that their dreams are achievable in a summarizing sort of way. But back to where I was. So boy meets girl. We're both enamored with Nepal. We go on this epic adventure through Asia, and Carver really starts to instill this love of traveling. And the way that we would do these trips is I was in a position where I was working remotely, which I understand is a very privileged position to be in. And Carver at the time was a student, and I was supporting us financially. And that gave us some freedom. For years, we have this tradition too, where every year we do this kind of interview with each other. It's actually really cute. But one of the questions in this interview is, what is an adventure you want to go on next year? Like, where's your top adventure? And every single time his would be like, I want to go to Nepal. And then he'd ask me on my birthday, I'd be like, I want to go to Nepal. And so for years, we played this game of, I want to go to Nepal. I want to do this thing. And it turned into this, well, someday we're gonna go to Nepal. Someday we're gonna do this. So backing up into one of probably the biggest barrier for me when it came to Nepal. I basically, when we got married and I started birth control, it really, really affected me deeply. I think within 3 months I had gained 40 pounds. I was covered head to toe in stretch marks. And I think when we got married, I was around 150, 160 pounds, which is very normal, average. And so all of a sudden I'm up to roughly 200 pounds, and nothing had changed besides taking on this birth control. Wow. And so it was a wild adventure. And it's still to this day, like, it like makes me really sad to even talk about, because I think it's my biggest regret in life. If I could go back and be like, hey, don't do that. Don't do that. I would. But anyways, so I gained 40 pounds, and the next thing I knew, I'm sad and I'm angry and I'm depressed because of this weight that I had put on. And I was like, I'm young, I'm 24. I'll get rid of it and my body will bounce right back. So I did. Got rid of the birth control, and for 2 years I did everything I had ever done to stay fit or lose weight. And I'm a very active person. Like, I was doing Xterra triathlons at the time. I was running a lot of half marathons or Ragnar races. I mountain bike a lot. I ski a lot. All these things, very active. and I wouldn't gain or lose a pound. It was really odd. So
Your
finally,
hormones got fuckered.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I finally, after 2 years, I went into a hormone specialist, had the whole spiel, right? The panels, the blood test, the saliva test, and my estrogen to progesterone ratio was 67, and it's supposed to be somewhere around 3 to 500. So I was just crazy estrogen dominant. And the way she explained it to me is she goes, your body is essentially acting like you're pregnant, but you're not.
Wow.
It was,
Wow.
it was, it was terrible. And so for a few years, I'm still young, I'm 26, and I'm paying out of pocket for hormone therapy. And here in the United States, that meant $300, $400, $500 a month.
Mhm.
And at that time and at that age, that was so completely unaffordable for me. And so I also paired a lot of like herbs and new other nutrition and things with this protocol, and got to a point where I could at least lose like 15, 20 pounds. And got to this place where it always felt like I was never going to get rid of this extra weight, right? Like I felt defeated. I felt isolated. I felt alone in it. And the biggest disconnect and hardest thing for me was feeling like who I was on the outside didn't reflect at all who I was on the inside.
Mm.
And when you meet people and they see that you're overweight, they make assumptions about you, right? Like they stereotype you, they put you in a box, and tell you, like what you can or cannot do. And until you've been in that situation, you don't actually realize how much that shows up. And it's in really subtle ways that people don't think they even notice. Like it might be at a hike and a friend assumes that, like you're going to struggle to get to the top. And so they're like, oh, don't worry, I'll be slow with you. And you're like, excuse me.
You're considering only their biases.
Anyways, I lived like this for, until I was about 32. So almost 10 years, and got to a point where I was so defeated with where I was physically that it's not that I gave up or stopped working out. I really had to change my mental focus into I am overweight, but I am strong. Like I can do things. I might be slow, but I am so strong. And sadly, my inner voice would give myself a lot of excuses for why I couldn't lose this weight, right? Like I would tell myself like, oh, your hormones are messed up. So, and I came from a really religious background, and this is pretty hard thing to also deal with and come to realization that I used to do this. I don't anymore. But I used to tell myself that if I did something that God wouldn't appreciate, that he would punish me by not letting me be able to lose weight. Like that was the way my mind worked. And it's not a healthy place to be. So, okay. So I got to a point where I was like, as much as I'm like, yeah, I want to go to Nepal. Like I want to do that. I'm like, I can't physically do this. And I know how to suffer. I'm very good at suffering. I've done, again, some very incredible physical things in my life, but I knew that this one felt insurmountable. So at 32, I got pregnant with my son and had a very strange experience. I was at my heaviest I had ever been when I got pregnant with my son. I was roughly like 236 pounds. And while I was pregnant with him, I continued to lose weight every single appointment. So at the end, after right before I went in to have him, I had lost 30 pounds. Which was
Whoa, that really I don't know the scientifics of it, but it makes you think hormonally,
oh yeah,
what was happening at that point. And Just like
Wild.
a extra side
Wild.
tangent, the fact that in so many medical systems as well, like the women's bodies and things like that is never the focus. And like also when you're dealing with stuff like that, how dismissive it can be. So it's like wild to think like, oh, I had to get pregnant for this to start to regulate kind of thing. You know what
Yes.
I mean? Like that's crazy.
Yes. Oh, and it was really interesting what it did in my brain. In a way, it kind of validated some of this emotion and feeling that I had. And so as this was happening, I started to change my narrative, where I started to be like, oh my gosh, your body's resetting. Your hormones are resetting. Like this is a new opportunity for you. And I mean, after I had my son, I had this, beautiful, beautiful baby, and he was healthy and I was healthy, and it was a wonderful experience, truly. And I remember pregnancy and having a child is the most sacrificial thing a woman can do, period. I truly believe that. And I had this moment for a while after he was born that I was like, I am a goddamn goddess. I made life. I am divine.
Yeah.
I was feeling myself.
Good for you,
And
girl.
it was truly this moment in my life where I had never really felt that way about my body specifically. And I reveled in it. Like I just was like, yeah, I'm hot stuff. And
Which is normally like the opposite of what so many women feel about themselves after giving birth. They feel,
oh yeah, we're getting
and
there.
so that's
She's like,
I was gonna say you got to preach it to the girl, gals in the back.
we're getting there. And so I remember slowly postpartum's creeping in, right? She's coming for me. She's coming.
Mm.
And I remember desperately wanting to hold on to this feeling of like, I am a goddess. I am divine. Like my body is incredible. And again, postpartum's creeping in. And I remember my narrative in my head, like those negative thought patterns, they kept coming back. They're creeping back into my speech to myself and the way I talk to myself. And I remember desperately wanting to hold on to this feeling and watching it just slowly slip through my fingers. And, went into full, postpartum. And wow, what a place to be. I have so much love and empathy for women that go through this experience. And it's also lonely and isolating. And for me, it really showed up in social anxiety or anxiety in general. So I didn't want to see my friends. I didn't want to go out. I didn't really, and if I did, I wouldn't speak. I wouldn't talk. I would overthink everything, And as far as my health, I just wasn't taking care of myself as far as my weight or anything like that. I was really, really focused on just getting out of this postpartum period of my life. And so fast forward a year, it's really weird. I remember women telling me when you hit about a year after your pregnancy, it's like these curtains get lifted and the lights shine on you again. And you're like, hello, it's me. I've arrived. I'm back. And I didn't really believe that until all of a sudden I was like, that's funny.
Till the curtains parted. Till that light shone down. You were like, oh, hey. Oh, hey. Okay.
I heard about this.
Yeah. Hey, I've heard about this. This is nice. And so after that year, like I had digressed, right? I had gained that weight back that I had shed while I was pregnant. And at this point I was like, okay, I am ready. Like things have to change. What have I been doing? And I did this kind of full introspective inventory of, Alexa, what are your thought patterns? What are your feelings? What is this? What does this? And
core belief systems. Is that what you're kind of speaking to? Like that, like what are my core belief systems? Because it's like they play such a huge role into every action that we take in a day. And there's things that are taking place that are out of our control, but there's things that we are subconsciously like threading through our day every single day by not taking inventory of our core belief systems about ourselves, other people, the world around us. And then we think that those things are happening to us in other areas, and they're not. We're actually cultivating them. You know, we have no awareness because we haven't really taken a look at what we truly believe.
What led me to being able to do this inventory and have this experience outside of myself where I could look in is I spent a lot of time, again, while I was going through postpartum and in this internal battle, looking at my core belief system. I went through and unpacked everything that I felt like I could. Like I unpacked my religion, I unpacked my youth, and what are these narratives? And like society is a construct, and it goes on and on and on, right?
Yeah.
And doing that work really put me in this position where, again, at that year mark, where I finally felt like I was me again, that I could take a step out of it. I could look at myself and be like, you have everything that you need to be able to achieve what you want to achieve. How are we going to make that happen? And so I made these small, minute changes that just snowballed for me in the most beautiful way. So it started with, okay, I had been using a set of nutrition, like nutritionals, and they worked so well for me that all of a sudden I had more energy and could feel confident about getting dressed in the morning and putting on makeup and small things like that. Just that one small thing I did for myself. You get into a habit of like, okay, I'm going to take my supplements this morning. And you're like, I already did one small thing to take care of myself. And it kind of becomes this little bit of a game where you're like, what else can I do? And it turns into that same theory of like, I went to the gym today, so I don't want to eat pizza because I already went to the gym. You know what I mean? Like, do you guys do
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. Oh,
I
yeah,
mean, I did
absolutely.
go for a run today and ate pizza after, but
I'm proud of you.
She's on holiday.
Sometimes you eat that
ebb and flow.
Okay.
But when you're doing investments in yourself and you are seeing the payoff of it, it's absolutely, that's why it starts to compound, and that's why you get the momentum going in that direction. Is when you start to do things that serve you well, your body and brain and soul crave more of it. And so you're more willing to take that next step versus being like, can't be bothered, I'll do it on Monday, you know?
Yes. And they did. And that's what happened for me is, again, it started with this stupid little, packet of pills that I would take every night before bed. And the next day I would feel better. And over time it accumulated into my hair is better. I have more energy. I'm feeling more confident. I want to get dressed. I want to go to the gym. I want to make time for my hobbies, which that got to a really, really hard spot. I'm sure you guys have felt this. I'm sure every woman alive has felt this. I remember calling my mom once and being like, distraught. Mom, how is a woman supposed to have a career, have hobbies, have a clean house, go to the gym, eat clean, have friendships, and then have time for their spouse, but also have any type of like aspiration goals, like these things that you want to do? I'm like, I can't do it all. I cannot. I don't have time. I can't do it. And I remember she literally laughed at me. She started laughing at me. And it was funny because like my mom and I don't necessarily always have these types of conversations. So it was extra special for me because she starts laughing and she goes, you don't, you don't do it all.
Yeah.
She's like, you have to pick and choose what's important to you. And so there's a season for things, right? Like there's always a season. And after going through this pregnancy and postpartum, I was like, it's my season. Like I need to prioritize me, and I need to prioritize things that make me happy, because I was trying get through this postpartum recovery and dealing with some depression. And I started making time for my hobbies. So I'm back on my mountain bike. I'm learning to go ski again. I'm finding time to meet my friends at the gym, where before that would have been like the absolute last thing I wanted to do, right? And again, so like I said, it snowballed. So I started seeing, like the pounds come off, and it gets to a point where you're like, I feel so much better. And I got to a point after about a year that I was down almost 55, 60 pounds. And this was what was really beautiful, is that whole 10 years of wanting so badly to go to Nepal and have that experience. My internal narrative was, you can't do that. If you ever lose 50 pounds, you can go. And that is what I always told myself. That was my narrative. So every time I was like, oh, Nepal, someday, some way, when you lose 50 pounds, you can go. And it was actually funny. We were heading on this camping trip. I'm with my husband and my best friend, and there was a flight to Costa Rica. And they both were like, let's go to Costa Rica, la, la, la. And so they turned to me and they're like, Lex, you want to go? And I'm kind of quiet for a second because I'm like, how do I best, approach this? And I said, well, listen, for the last 15 years almost, I have told myself that if I lose 50 pounds, I get to go to Nepal. And I hit that goal this week. So we have to go to Nepal. We have to go. And both of them didn't ask questions. They were like, you got it. We're in.
Yes.
And my best friend, he's so freaking cute. This was so out of his comfort zone. I keep taking him on all of these adventures and things that he's like, I really hate you for this, but I love you for this so much. And so when I was like, Craig, we're going to Nepal, he was like, to do what exactly? And I'm like, we're gonna go climb up to Everest Basecamp. And he's like, what does that entail? And when I explained it to him, he was like, oh shit. Okay. I can do this for you. And so literally in the car on this way to go camping, we pull up flights and we book flights then and there. And yeah, like then and there we do it, we commit. And it's November last year, I'm like, okay, I have 10 months to essentially prepare for this trip. And what a motivation tool. I know for some people that works and some people that doesn't, but
what's that? What motivation tool?
That motivation tool of like, you're going to Nepal, you're not 100% ready. If you had to go tomorrow, you probably are going to fail, but you have 10 months.
Yeah, you're committing to a date. And that's
Yes.
scientifically proven to fucking work.
I was going to say, yeah, that's why I wanted you to say it out loud, because I'm like, when you say it doesn't work for most people, there's other things that the other excuses that get in the way. But one of the best odds of actually doing it is saying a date, saying it out loud, and having an accountability for it. And also it's already telling your brain and body of what's to come versus, out loud versus within yourself. You can kind of like, oh, that can float away like a cloud very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now all of a sudden I had this concrete date, and then it turned into like, oh shit, what have I done? And how am I actually going to prepare for this? Like I've lost 50, 60 pounds, but that doesn't mean that my cardio or like what I'm necessarily going to be able to do is enough for this. And setting that huge monumental goal just put the wind in my sails. I was on a mission. And so for the last 10 months, it turned into like, I was going to, like, I made time for myself to go to the gym and go do cardio and go do these hikes. And it became more of a mission and a commitment. And it's what was really beautiful about it. Going back just a little bit, like I was saying, I love to suffer. I'm really good at it. Motorcycles, you know what I mean. Motorcycle trips, you suffer. And so there was a point after I had my son, again, going through postpartum. I think he was roughly 4 or 5 months old. And I had planned this backpacking trip where we went from the Idaho side of the Tetons in Jackson Hole to the Wyoming side of the Tetons. And it was 24 miles. We had 24 hours to do it. And it was, I think, somewhere around like 6,000 or 7,000 feet of elevation total on this trip. And at the end of the first day, my body gave out on me. Like we were maybe a half mile away from finishing. And I think I literally sat down and I started crying. And I was like, I've never had this experience that like my body just gave out on me. And I was so frustrated and so mad and angry because I was like, I don't necessarily want to lose weight to look a certain way. I want to be able to do the things that I want to do that are important to me. Like that was what drove me, and that was what kind of put these wind in my sails. So fast forwarding to Nepal, that was like the ultimate culmination of like, yeah, bitch, you better get your shit together because you're going. And so this last 10 months, like I made the time, I made the dedication, I made the effort. And it was so beautiful because it shows up in different parts of your life, right? Like you open yourself to that. I feel confident, I feel healthy, I feel motivated. And it shows up in your career. It shows up in your friendships and like what you allow into your life. It makes you kind of, in a way, you have to set boundaries, but those boundaries are easier to stick to. It just, when you make yourself a priority and your health a priority, the universe follows, is a good way to say that.
Yes, it does.
It does. And so, yeah, you guys, I hiked my little heart out. Like I said, I live in Utah. So for me, we are right in the mountains, right? So like I am 3 blocks away from hundreds of miles of trails. And in my backyard, I can go, up 4,500 vertical feet. Just, it's right there. So I was able to just go and do it and make it a priority. And I remember one of our last training hikes, we did this pretty big hike. You go up over the mountain, then you drop down into the top of a ski resort. And they do like a Sunday brunch at this lodge, like really fancy lodge. And I was like, I think I invited my friends and I was like, hey, we're going to brunch. It's going to be great. You have to hike 8 miles to get there. And again, they were all pretty good sports. But I remember on that hike, I'm having the time of my life. Like I feel great. I am in my element. I'm looking at the world and I'm like, wow, this is it. And I remember turning around and my 3 friends that came with me were like, 2-3 minutes behind me, and all of their faces were like, this is bullshit. This is terrible. And they like caught up to me. Like I stopped, waited, and they're like, you're ridiculous. And it was the first time in a long time that I was in a position where I wasn't the one that was miserable, right? Like I was the one that was like flourishing and in my element, and I felt strong and I felt capable. And to be able to have that and say that and do that was like it's life-changing. And going back to the physical part of this, I need to make note to the spiritual and mental side of what really changed for me. So again, making that commitment to like, I'm going to Everest, I'm doing this. I had already started that journey, but I took a good, long, hard look of like, what am I saying to myself? What am I saying to myself? And what are you telling her? Because she's believing whatever you're saying. And again, I had these negative thought patterns, right? Where I would tell myself I couldn't lose the weight, or I couldn't do that, or I would never feel the way that I feel now. And I remember it started with like, if I started to have those patterns, I'd be like, nope. It's literally this like hard stop in my brain, almost where you're visualizing you like grabbing yourself and being like, we don't talk that way about our friends.
Yes.
Like we don't do that. And it also turned into me spiritually, where I really turned to, you can call it a ceremony or whatever you want, but I would sit down with myself once a month and I would journal and write about the things that I had experienced that month before, and anything that I really wanted to let go of, and anything that I wanted to bring into this next month. And it was so helpful for me because it gave me like a physical way to write down what wasn't working, and then to physically let it go and like get it out. And then what else I figured out is I had to actually talk with someone about what I had written. It wasn't enough for me to say it to myself. I had to literally, like find that friend, and she's been great. She listens all the time. But I had to sit there and explain and share with her, like, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's things that I, like I'm a little ashamed that I think that, but I would share those things and I would talk about them. And it was so spiritually and mentally and emotionally cleansing. And now I get to the point where, like, if I can get someone's ear, I'm like, hey, you should write down your goals and your feelings for the month. And then you should talk about, like, you should plan your next month. And
Yeah, we always want to share that. And I think it is an important thing when you've had something so cathartic and a tool. It's sharing tools of like, hey, try this tool. It might work for you. It might not, but it worked exceptionally well.
yeah.
It might work for you. And a lot of times they really do work for most people.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like pairing that with this, like true motivation, dedication, and stubborn will to make this goal that I had wanted for so long happen. It all led to this point where I think like a couple of weeks before the trip, we actually went and got our VO2 max tested. Have you guys ever done that?
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's not fun. It's wow. You essentially, they strap this like headgear looking tube thing to your face and make it so you can't breathe out of your nose. There's like almost a hose that goes into your mouth down your throat, and then you have to run on a
It's
treadmill.
all like performance fitness industry.
This
That's the only
thing.
reason why I've done it, because of like fitness industry conference where all the VO2 max companies are like set in the hall.
Yeah. And
It's
so,
intense.
like, it is. I mean, we did it because we were like, how do you calculate if you're ready to go do something like Everest? Like, not the full mountain, but we just did base camp. But how do you calculate if you're ready to do this? Like, what's the unit of measure? Right. And so we went and got this done. And I remember being like, this is terrible. And I had done all of this work, you guys, and I just came back as like average. And I remember being like, fuck yeah, average.
Yeah.
I was like, I amped up for average. I'd be like, yeah. Same thing.
I was
fuck yeah.
stupid excited about the fact that, because
Yeah.
a year ago, it probably would have been like, oh, you need to try harder. So it felt good. And so then it was like my whole goal after we did this test to just get to like the good. Like average is great, but like I just want to be good. And so a couple weeks before we went on that trip, I ended up hitting that goal of just being good. Just good. And I remember being like, I'm ready. I am ready. I'm prepared. And we got there, and Nepal is, what an experience. Kathmandu is chaos. It's dirty. It's the third most populated, or polluted country in the world. I think like right next to Bangladesh and India. And you basically pop onto this tiny little airplane. It fits 20 people, including the pilots. And they go around and they pass out cotton balls. And you have to stick these cotton balls in your ears because the sound is so loud from this tiny little like prop airplane. And they fly you up to this town. It's called Lukla. And it sits, the runway essentially sits on a cliff. No joke. I think the runway is 600 feet long.
Oh, shit.
So it's like
Oh my
200
God.
meters. And so when you go to land, it's literally uphill. Like the runway is uphill. So as you're landing, you're going uphill. And then as you're taking off, you're going downhill. And it's dubbed the world's most dangerous airport. And I just remember people have asked me like, oh my gosh, were you nervous? And I was like, I was too nervous about the hiking part that I couldn't like even focus on this airplane. And you get there, you get your bag, and then you go. Like you start hiking immediately. And we had caught the very beginning of hiking season. They do one season in the spring and one season in the fall. And typically you start hiking in October. But we went the very end of August, right? Beginning of September. And so it's the tail end of monsoon season.
Oh, shit.
And yeah. Yeah. And actually it worked out really well in our favor because it was green. There were wildflowers everywhere.
Ooh.
We only got rained on for, maybe an hour or two. But
Oh, I was like, how drenched were you? Because I'm like,
I know.
it could have been so different.
so different. And no, we lucked out big time. And like I said, you hit the ground running. Like you're hiking, you're doing it. And I had all this anxiety on this, like it takes so long to get over there. I mean, just one flight from LA to Singapore was 17 hours, like one flight. It's terrible. Anyways, and I remember being on the plane and being like a little anxious about like, okay, you're going to hike. Like, what if you can't do it? What if it's really hard? What if you're really slow? And again, like all of those old negative thought patterns, right? They're coming at me. And so we get there, we get our bags and we start hiking. And I remember just being like, it doesn't matter, Alexa, like you're here, take it in, enjoy it. And have you guys ever had an experience where you're somewhere that you've like wanted to be, or like it's so beautiful, or it's such a monumental thing for you that you have a hard time grasping its reality?
That sense of awe on
Yes.
steroids.
Yes. I'm looking at these mountains, like we're working our way up this valley, and I could go into explanation of like this hike and these people and what goes on there. But you start at 9,000 feet, right? And the highest point we went to was 18,500 feet. And they do a good job of acclimatizing you to the altitude. Like you basically go do hikes, you come back down, you sleep at lower elevation. Like they do a good job of that. But we're going up, and I remember getting to a point where I'm like, holy shit, we're at 14,000 feet. This is incredible. And you look next to you and this mountain comes up above you and it is towering over you. And you're like, oh, wow. And then you look at the stats and you're like, that mountain is 25,000 feet tall. That's why. And so you feel so small and you feel so big all at the same time. And it was so overwhelming for me to realize, like, I have dreamt about this moment for so long. I'm here. I'm in it. I can touch it. I can breathe it. I can smell it. And to realize that it was reality, right? And one of our acclimatizing hikes, the way that it worked is they would take you up on this ridge, and in this ridge there were prayer flags every 100 meters up this hill, and you could kind of like choose your own adventure, right? And our guide was like, yeah, we're gonna do like 3, maybe 4 flags. And so we get to the 3rd flag, and again, best friend Craig, or 4th flag, excuse me, I gotta give him credit. We get to the 4th flag, and he's like, I'm out, I'm done, peace, like, I'll see you guys when you're done. And so I'm like, oh. At this point, I think we were at 15,000 feet, and it is straight up a hill. And I'm like, I think I can do one more. We'll see. So we get to the one more, and I'm like, okay, that was terrible. Let's go do another one, you know? And so then we chug up to the next one, and we got to 16,000 feet, which is the highest I had ever been in my life. Like, I had done another hike in Peru that had gotten me that high, but that moment in time was the highest elevation I had ever done. And I'm sitting in this gorgeous valley with Ama de Blanc right over my head. And Ama de Blanc is one of the bigger mountains in that region. And it's, like I said, I think it's 23,000 feet. And it just towers over you. And so I'm sitting on this ridge and I'm staring right at her. And I think her and I had like this moment where she was like, yeah, like, you did it, you know, like, you're here and you did it. And like, as hard as it was and as much as got in the way, you're here and you did it. And I had this like basically meditative moment. I let my husband and the guide, they wanted to keep going. And I was like, I don't have an ego, I think. Keep going. and, and so I was able to sit and enjoy this moment. And I remember like crying and being like, I could physically do this. And a couple days later, we get up to Everest Basecamp. And it was kind of an interesting experience because it's not the climbing season. So it's like empty, you know? So you have this thought of like Everest Basecamp all builds up in your head, and you get up there, it's 17,500 feet. And there was no one there. There's like a rock, and like it's like spray painted like Everest Basecamp. It's still really cool.
Amazing.
I'm still downplaying it a little. It was really,
But I know what you mean.
cool.
We envision something for those kind of moments, and the reality is a very different experience sometimes, especially when there's not the like hub and bub of all these climbers coming through, and you know, it's just like whistling wind. Hello?
I literally was like, there. Then like again, it was pre-season, hike season. So imagine like we start this trek, and there's probably like 10, 15 other hikers the entire time. And this it's an 11-day trek. And so you start to see these people over and over again. Like, you maybe didn't stay in like the same tea house that night, but like you'll see them on the trail. And so like you kind of bond with these other hikers. And you know, so you're at Everest Base Camp, and then like here comes your buddy that you've been seeing, and you're like, hey, we did it. Like, yeah. And I think that was probably a little more special for Carver because he had read all those books, and for him to be able to sit at Everest Base Camp and be like, I'm here, and this is where all these stories that I've read and like fallen in love with, like, they started here, which was really beautiful. The highlight for me of this trip was a couple things, but the first one was every night they would test our blood oxygen levels, right? So they'd sit down and they like put the monitor on your finger and like wait for the machine to tell you like how you're doing. And every time I had the highest blood oxygen levels, and I like remember being like, suck it, boys. I'm better. Yeah, I just remember being like, like in the mountains, just be a brat. But
but it's that proof. It's that like you know, hard science proof of everything that you work towards, and that, you know, it's not people waiting on you, and it's not those kind of things that were harder. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but those harder moments, it's that like I'm in a different space and place. I am a different person on this side.
Yeah. And that's like at the tea house we stayed at right there sits at 17,000 feet. Do you sleep right there at 17,000 feet? And I was kind of like, altitude sickness is weird in the way that it shows up. It's kind of different for everyone, and the severity of it fluctuates through the day. And so it kind of comes and goes. At least for me, it was. So like every once in a while, I'd be like, "Oh, I have a headache," and then it would be gone a half hour later. Or like, "I'm nauseous. I don't want to eat right now," but then you can eat later. And so this 17,000 foot mark was the first time I found like a little comfortable. It's fine. Like, I can do this summit tomorrow. So part of this trek is you can opt to go do a summit. It's called Kalapatar, and it's the 18,500 feet. And it gives you this really famous viewpoint of Mount Everest. And the way that we did it is we wake up at 3:30 in the morning and we hike up this summit. You gain 1,500 feet in less than a mile. So it is.
Shit.
It is straight up. And you get up there and then you watch the sunrise over Mount Everest. And that morning I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I don't know if I can do 18,500. Like I'm already starting to feel some of these experiences you have with altitude sickness. Like, I don't know if I can do this. And I just remember being like, bitch, shut up, put your shit on, we're going, you're gonna be fine. And I remember like hiking up this straight up cliff face essentially and just being like, okay, one foot in front of the other, like, you can do this, you've worked so hard for this. And as we're getting up to the top, like, it starts snowing, it starts raining a little bit, and then the rain turns to snow, and you're just like, okay, we're going. And I remember finally getting to that top, and like, I wouldn't allow myself to like take in the view. Like I was like, no, you got to get to the top and then you can enjoy this. And I remember crawling up on this rock and like turning around and sitting down, and Mount Everest is right in front of me and the sun is coming up and there's like clouds, and it was ethereal. Like, it was so beautiful. And I just like, I sat there and I just cried for a moment, and I was just like so proud of myself, like so proud. Like, you did this, you could do this, you couldn't do this a year ago. Like, I'm so proud of you for getting over all of those things that you dealt with and told yourself, and you were able to put it all together. And it was funny. I think my guide made fun of me for it later. He was like, I saw you crying. And I was like, yeah, I was.
You're like, yes, and?
And
did you have an epiphany of life this morning, sir? No.
Yeah, exactly. But that people ask me, that was your favorite part of the trip. I kind of had to take a step back, and the answer was so simple, and it's, I could do it. In the end, it was over 100 miles of hiking and 32,000 feet of elevation gain and loss. And doing that at elevation like that it's not easy. It's not easy. And so that also adds a layer of complexity to it. But what was also incredible is, as hard as it was, it wasn't that hard. And to be able to say that because of what I've done and what I've been able to go through and getting to where I am now. And it's funny because people might be listening to this and be like, I bet she's ripped. Nah, dude, I'm still imperfect. Like, I'm still working on it. I'm still trying to get stronger and better. And going on this trip really inspired me to be able to kind of level up in a way where I'm like, okay, what else am I capable of doing?
What a fucking fabulous, curious question for oneself. And after going on that journey, like, it's going to be some epic shit.
I hope so. I think Alma de Blom and I had a whole conversation about how I needed to go climb her, which we'll see.
That'll be
We'll
the
see.
next episode. In that, I think this is like the perfect timing, really and truly, to share a little bit of the. This is where we sing it. Motivation, maintenance.
I think
Of
it needed
like-
big soul there
Wow.
for like Everest.
That was
Is
that like-
good for you?
To that person that, is feeling, whether it's like locked in their story, whether that person is, been handed some unfortunate circumstances, and locked in their story and not knowing it, or they have that thing that they've always wanted to do and they do the should or one day, or, what's a piece of advice that you would give to them of where to start, or what's your little piece of knowledge and wisdom from your epic journey that you just shared with us?
Dream big and don't be afraid to take risks, because that is the only way you experience growth, is if you dream and you risk it all. And even if you can't do it or you can't achieve it, you made yourself better by taking steps to be able to do those things.
Fuck yes. We do also always leave our little episodes here on a quote or just a little mantra that sometimes resonates with one individual. So what would be a quote or mantra that you'd like to share with us?
Oh. This is something that I say frequently to loved ones, and it's make choices. So when I'm leaving someone, and instead of being like make good choices or make bad choices, it's make choices. And
Yes.
what that means for me is that you're not always going to choose right. You're not always going to choose wrong. You might make mistakes. You might have big wins, but you're going to push forward and you're going to keep making choices.
Thank you. Sincerely.
Absolutely.
I would have
Absolutely.
expected nothing less.
Nothing
When I
less.
met you, nothing less. Well, just because that's what whenever I meet a person where I'm like, oh, you're one of my people, I think now to put words to it more, it's when I meet other awakened humans.
Yeah.
And not in that kind of cliche of like, I had an awakening, or or like there's the woke. No, but like people that are willing to really look at the hard parts of life and say, I'm going to take what is, but I'm going to create a new as well. And I'm going to decide what I do with it. But people that are doing the work to kind of wake themselves up and make choices, like to go back to what you said, like choose, choose and make choices. And, like as scary ones, make it, sad ones, make them, excited ones, make them. But choose and move and go and fail forward. And I, within that first conversation, like I said, that stood out immediately that you were, one of those people. And then I made sure to make you a video and be like, let's never lose each other. Now that we found, So we appreciate you. Appreciate your story. Appreciate who you are. Appreciate all you're doing. We're going to have you back on another time to share your incredible story of not just wellness in regards to what you shared, but wellness in regards to a family-owned business that you are taking in a beautiful direction in and around the Unani and Unani Life, correct? It's Unani Life. Yeah. And with vitamins and supplements, and we're going to share that in the information as well. I need to get a hold of you so that I can get my orders in, because I'm like, ever since the summit, I'm like, how do I get this shit in my system? Like, so, and you have some incredible goals that you shared with me of what you want to do and share and empower people through that health journey as well. So we'll be looking forward to hearing more about that as well in the future. But thank you again for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's another thing that I'll leave with is that everyone has a story and everyone's story should be heard. And so when you get opportunities to tell it, don't be shy, because it really does impact people. And I feel privileged that you guys gave me that opportunity. So thank you.
Of course. Well, that, my friends,
is your motivation.
You've just listened to the Motivation Podcast with your hosts, Chrissy Van and me, Lori Joy Kingwell.
And thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motivation Podcast and visit our website at themotivation.com.
And remember, tanks full, full throttle.